Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, owner of Fearless Financial Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females. Thank you so much for joining us for another Fearless Females podcast. I would just like to say thank you to all those listeners out there. I enjoy doing this so much. I really love hearing these stories of these incredible women who are just doing amazing things. And sometimes you hear about their triumphs and sometimes you hear about their harder moments, but I just can't tell you how much inspiration I take from these stories. And I really appreciate that some of you have reached out and said, you know what? It inspired me too, or I love that episode, or thank you for sharing that story. And so I just really appreciate it. I know I'm supposed to say like follow or link or whatever to the podcast. So do that too. But I really appreciate it when you guys listen and let me know that it made a difference in your life. So today we are meeting Ellen Frazier. She is a mortgage broker, she's a recovery coach, and she's founder of the Booze Free Babes. And the thing that I loved, Ellen's story is kind of full of courage and sort of reinventing herself. But the part that I loved, at one point she says, I changed the narrative from why me to why not me? And that has stuck with me so long. I'm actually recording this intro a month or so after we actually did the podcast recording. And it stuck with me that whole time. And in fact, I put it on my little vision board up here that changed the narrative from why me to why not me? Like, why can't I be the one that does this? Why shouldn't I be the one that they hire? Why not me? So I love that she came at that with a more hopeful, sort of inspiring kind of viewpoint. And I think you'll find that throughout my conversation with Ellen. So let's get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're here with Ellen Frazier. She's a mortgage broker and a recovery coach. And I'm really excited to hear Ellen's story. I feel like she's got some really, challenging circumstances that she's been through in her career and her journey. And I love that she's going to share her experience and her wisdom with us. So thank you so much, Ellen, for joining us today. I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me on the Fearless Females podcast. This is such an awesome experience. I'm looking forward to our journey together over the next few minutes.
So the very first question I always ask is, I'm a reader. I love any and all suggestions. What is your favorite book?
Okay, so I have recently read a couple of books, and I call it Quit Lit. Actually, my friend Whitney kind of coined it as Quit Lit, I guess. But I love Quit Lit, like Think Like a Woman, Naked Mind. Those two I've read recently. The book that I'm working on right now is Recovery with Yoga by Brian Hyman, and I'm actually teaching a yoga class around that text. So it's a lot of fun. That book is probably my favorite at the moment because I'm fully immersed in it.
Oh, I like that. And that's one that you can practice while you're reading, right?
Exactly. And it basically breaks it down to different themes like acceptance or courage or surrender and things like that. So as we're going through the book, we get to navigate those different themes. So it's pretty fun.
I like that idea. I have someone that loves yoga. In fact, she's training to be a yoga instructor. I'm gonna send that suggestion to her. So thank you.
Please do. He's such a great author, and he just puts things into words in a way that we can understand it, very clearly.
So tell me a little bit about your journey, Ellen. How did you get started? How did you get where you're at today? And kind of what do you do? Just tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, I'd love to. So I'm a mortgage broker and I'm recently adorned recovery coach. So I'm super excited about that new piece of my journey. I started out in the mortgage business way back in the early 2000s. So I started when I was like 12 years old.
You knew what you wanted to be early.
Right, exactly. So I've been doing the mortgage piece of it for quite a while, right? Over 20 years. That's been an exciting roller coaster with all of the changes that we see in the marketplace and in, just our political climate and everything. So I've seen a lot of ups and downs over that throughout my 20-year plus career. But a new thing that I've just added is my recovery coaching designation. I received that in February, and I'm really excited about the direction that that's going to take us. We partnered with Favor Low Country Faces and Voices of Recovery and received the Certified Peer Support Specialist certification so that I can continue to serve in my community. So I'm really excited about adding that piece to my career choice.
So you said you were a mortgage broker since you were 12. Like, is that really, did you go to school to like be a mortgage broker? Is there a degree for that? Like, I don't know. Tell me.
There's definitely lots of education and continuing education every year. Just like you, we have our continuing education that we have to do too. I started out with a bank originally. And so all of my training was through the bank at that time, which when you're with a bank platform, you don't require your own independent license. You can leverage their license. So I didn't actually get my license going out on my own until 2016, I believe it was. That's when I decided to leave the bank environment and go with a retail lender and get fully licensed. So even that process has changed, I think, since then. So it's been exciting, though, getting into it. I was recruited fairly early out of college. And that's an interesting story, too, because I have an art degree and I was working with a design firm out of Greensboro, North Carolina at the time. And I was on the local Home Builders Association board. And one of the bankers on that board really liked the way that I packaged our sales packages for builders. And so he was like, you're really good at this and you've got great enthusiasm. I think you'd be great at mortgages. I have to say, when he said that, I was like, why would I be great at mortgages? I'm having so much fun playing with all this art and colors and textures and different things. That's really what my degree was based upon and background was in, right? And so you know how it goes. One day I just got fed up at my job and I was like, you know what? I'm going to call that guy and see what mortgage is all about. And I'm glad I made that call because it's definitely been such a huge part of my life ever since.
That's so interesting because mortgage broker and art really are like diametrically opposed. There's like art is creative and all that sort of stuff, and mortgage broker is numbers and all the things that I love, both spreadsheets, stuff like that. So that's really interesting that he saw that in you, and that not only did he see it in you, but you continued down that path for years and years and years.
I think that what has allowed me to continue to lean into both sides, numbers and creativity, is probably the Booze Free Babes community that we've recently built within the past couple of years. That allows me to play into my creativity, to build that community and to lean on those women. And then we get to have so much fun doing all kinds of creative events. And that fuels me, right? Like we have to still have that creative outlet that fuels us. So that portion fuels me. And then, I'm all filled up when I go to work as a mortgage broker in the morning because of all the fun, yummy stuff we get to do with the babes.
I see that. Like sometimes you can't put every piece of you into your career because there just isn't enough space for it, maybe. But if you find a passion, like my Fearless Females, I found a passion that kind of connects with that and allows me that creativity in order to express myself. I love that idea. And what got you into the recovery? How come you got licensed as a recovery coach? Like what drove that?
I will say that, being a mortgage broker and being in that line of work, and I don't know if you've seen something similarly with financial advisors, but it is a high stress position and there is a lot of substance use disorder within that industry. And so I too had leaned into some unhealthy behaviors. And when the pandemic hit, I think that's when it really came to head. We're working at home. We're working at home with our spouses. A lot of us were homeschooling at the same time that we're trying to keep our, careers going. And we're all in this digital environment where we're, siphoning all the Wi-Fi and bandwidth. And, we had to upgrade all of that. So it was a really stressful time for all of us, right? Like, I think we all shared in that collective stress. And so I leaned heavily into maybe less supportive behaviors during that time frame too. So around 21, 22, that's when I started my sober curious journey. And then I committed to full sobriety at the end of 22. I committed to living a life completely without alcohol and abstaining from that. And I've continued that journey on into today. So I'm in actually my third year of sobriety. And that has brought so much growth personally first, which obviously impacted my professional career. Mm-hmm. And I'm so much more excited about my career today because of that sober journey. I feel like leaning into that journey has allowed me to lean into my life more, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, that does make sense because you're fully engaged in it. You're not trying to do too much and using, like you said, sometimes unhealthy coping mechanisms in order to get all that you feel like you need to do done, right?
I love how you said that I'm just leaning into my life more. That's right. I'm being fully present in my life. And that is so much fun and so exciting. And so if anybody listening to this hears that part of the message, it's so worth it.
I love it. So what is the best investment you've made in yourself? If you could look over your whole journey, like what is the best thing you've done that if you could go back and look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that.
Subconscious integrative therapy.
Okay. Talk to me about that.
I know the answer to that right off the top of my head. Subconscious integrative therapy. I was listening to a podcast during the pandemic, and it was a podcast of a business referral partner. And so I was really leaning into what they were saying. And if you remember, it seems like podcasts really took off during the pandemic because everybody had this extra time and bandwidth. They wanted to just listen and be outside of themselves, I guess. Yeah. So I listened to that podcast and I heard who is now my therapist. I heard her on the podcast, Ellie Richter, shout out. Anyway, I had called the host of the podcast. I reached out to her and I said, I didn't quite catch the contact information on the episode. Can you please share that with me? Who was that you were interviewing? She had sent me the information and it still took me probably 9 months to actually make the call. Mm-hmm. I knew that I needed something different in my life. I knew I needed a shift. I knew I needed change. And we're all experiencing a global pandemic together. We probably all felt like we needed some sort of change in our lives, right? Because mm-hmm. there had been so much disruption. And so I had made the phone call, and in that first call, I knew that that was the right methodology or practice for me, right? Mm-hmm. Like I knew that that was going to be the part of the healing journey that I needed the most. And so I still work with her today. We've been working together now for, I guess we're in our fourth year now of working together, and it's great. She's my touchstone. She's my sounding board. I feel like when you engage in subconscious integrative therapy, what happens is you reprogram those beliefs that you have that maybe are not so supportive. So for example, I'm not worthy. That may be a belief that I have. Well, let's shift that and replace it with the belief that I am worthy. I am valuable, right? Mm-hmm. And once you do that, you see that belief play out throughout your entire life. So for example, if we made a shift around a traumatic experience that I had in my teenage years, it's interesting how the way that you think and feel about that experience plays out at the age of 15, 20, 30, 40, and so on. So the way that I feel or think about an event also changes throughout the different milestones in my life. And so then you start to see this beautiful ripple effect happen throughout your entire life. that's the beauty of subconscious integrative therapy. And I highly recommend it for everyone.
It sounds like it would be really interesting younger, because then do you take those those experiences you've had and it changes the way that you react to them, like through your 30s and 40s and 50s and
Exactly. That's exactly it. That reflex muscle has been exercised, right? And so now it can work in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like what happens is that we have peace and non-attachment to the event, whatever traumatic event it was. And then when you have peace and non-attachment, see how that plays out in the rest of your life. It's really quite beautiful.
Oh, that's cool. And I was really resonating with what you were saying about like being in the middle of the pandemic. We were all kind of I am an introvert. I'm actually not extroverted at all. And it was so much self-reflection and thinking for me. I'm like, I need people. It just, you really do. You get, even an introvert, you get kind of lonely and and you have a whole lot of time to think about your life, think about what you're doing with your life and what you want to be doing with your life. And are you doing enough? And then on top of that, you've got, you're working with your spouse. In fact, I have 5 kids and they were all home during the pandemic. I had everyone doing school or work in a different room in the house. And, just getting down to the kitchen to get food was like a thing. So I see what you're talking about. Like that's a place where you can really start thinking about, it feels both chaotic and simple in terms of trying to decide what you want to do next.
Also too, I think during the pandemic, because we had that time on our hands, it was an opportunity to look at things differently. And during that time frame, being in mortgage, as you probably know, our interest rates were like historically low, right? So we were exploding with business, which is a beautiful thing. My husband's a realtor, so we work a lot together. But that extra work on top of that extra stress isn't always the perfect recipe, right? Mm-hmm. And so during that time frame, leaning into those unhealthy behaviors and shining a spotlight on it because of COVID, that's really the, tipping point that I needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to choose something differently for myself.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
There's great courage in that, right? There's great courage. And I think that's really the purpose of your podcast, Fearless Females. Like we want to talk about or speak to that courage because it does take great courage to recognize a behavior within ourselves that maybe we're not that crazy about. Like, why do I show up this way? Why do I react that way? It's really beneficial to just take pause and ask that question. Why do we do that? Why do we react that way? And then lean into the answer. That's where the real work happens.
Yeah, that's where the fearless part comes in, where the part where you're like, I'm scared. Can I really do this? Can I really change? But I want to try. I'm going to try. Yeah, I love that. Ellen, what is the worst advice someone gave you? Have you ever gotten really bad advice and did you take it?
Wow. I was nervous about this question because, of course, I want to stand in my power and say that every life experience that I've had has brought me to this point, whether it was great advice or bad advice. What I would say, though, to the listener as a young, budding, fearless female, what I would say is when it comes to your career, be very mindful about the direction that you want it to take and what you want that to look like. I feel like there have been times in my career, and especially as a female in the financial industry, which is, I think that we're seeing a huge spike in women now, like coming into the roles of leadership, but that wasn't always the case for us maybe when our career started, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my advice would be, or I would just say, choose your own path and find your path to greatness as quickly as you possibly can and lean heavily in your zone of genius. The reason why I say that is because in my career, I've probably been given advice that took me down a path that maybe that I didn't really need to go. I don't know if I needed to make that left-hand turn to management and then, a non-producing manager where I turned away my clients. You know what I mean? I did take on a management position one time, a leadership role that did require me to become a non-producing manager. And so I had to turn over my book of business. And that was something that, as you know, turning over your book of business is like turning over your livelihood. And so, ever since leaving that position, I've had to really, work on growing that BOB back. And that is challenging, as we all know, right? Growing that secure book of business and securing that book of business. So my suggestion would be think it all the way through and think it several years into the future, right? Like if I take this new role, this new position today, what is that leading me to in the future? Is this a temporary stop or is this the end of the road? Right. And a lot of times I made moves thinking it was going to be the final stop. And now that I look back, I was just settling. So my biggest advice would be don't settle. Keep going and keep pushing yourself forward. I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think that it alludes to the mistakes that I've made and how maybe someone could not make the same mistake.
Yeah, exactly. And I like the way that you kind of phrase that too, just sort of like think about what your future looks like before you make some of those decisions, because what's best for you today, right now, in this moment, may not be best for 3 years down the road. And maybe get some advice from like I always tell my daughter, I'm like, if you think she wants to go into psychology, and I'm like, if you think you want to work with kids, like go talk to someone who actually does what you're doing and see what advice they'd have for you. So I like that idea of kind of like looking into the future, maybe getting a little bit of flavor around what your futures could look like so that you can make a really good decision.
And I think it's always important to have an eye on that next step. What does it look like after this?
Yeah, it does. I probably live too much in the future and not enough in the present. What about a situation in your life as you kind of look back over your journey and your career? Is there a situation that you're like, oh, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done that differently? Obviously, if we knew the same things, we would just probably do it the same way. But what if you had the benefit of the knowledge that you've got today? Would you go back and change a situation and do it differently?
Again, I have to lean on the fact that I wouldn't want to change anything because it would not bring me to where I am today. And I know that the challenges that I faced in my career and over my life's journey are definitely what led me to create Booze Free Babes and brought me to this point. So to say that I would change something would say that I would change what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't. However, I do have a perspective. Had I chosen healthier alternatives to soothe, like for self-soothing, if I had chosen healthier alternatives, that may had given me a much easier life, right? Choosing to continue to drink after college, I feel like is where, if there was one thing that I would have shifted, it would have been that behavior. And so being courageous enough to identify those behaviors early on and do something about it, that would be my recommendation. I don't know if I was equipped with the tools then, right? Well, obviously, right? I mean, we're not equipped until we are. And so if there's something that you feel like within yourself that doesn't align or doesn't fit or doesn't match your career path, vision, dream, whatever, don't be afraid to look at that now. Because if you can grab a hold of that sooner, then it's just going to help you propel further on your path.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if you could have caught it sooner, though. I mean, like you said, like it's really hard to go back and tell yourself, hey, well, it's hard. It's hard to go back and just tell yourself that this isn't serving you. So how would you have caught it sooner?
Honestly, I think that the real question is, I love it when Gabor Mate, I don't know if you follow him, but he has this quote, why the pain, right? We have to ask ourselves why the pain, like the choosing to lean into a behavior like alcohol, that is the solution. A lot of us find that that is the solution to the pain, right? And so we have to address the pain. And I just don't think that I had a clear pathway on how to do that until I did. And so when I was in my 20s, it's not like a lot of people spoke openly about therapy and going to therapy and continuing that in their journey. I think it's so much more well received today. And also, dare I say this, but women seem that they just have to have it all figured out and have their stuff together, right? Because we're carrying the household, we're carrying, whatever we're carrying, the kids, whatever, we're carrying a lot. And so is there really room and time for us to care for ourselves too? The answer to that is yes. Now I can look back and say that, but not at the moment. In the moment, right? We're just dealing with what's right in front of us. So I think there's a narrative shift too in our culture that we have to fill up our cups before we can give for anyone else. And maybe that's a shift that we see going forward. But if anything, lean into yourself and make sure yourself is good before you try to lean into anyone else. Because even today, I notice that my patients wear thin when I'm not taking care of myself. And so the quickest way for me to kind of snap out of it is when I switch into, I call her Bitter Betty. When I flip into Bitter Betty, that's when I know, okay, all right, let me pump the brakes. I need to figure out where I'm, not taking care of myself in another area.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I think it's so important for women. We do wear so many hats and we do so much. And I think that the women that I've had on my podcast and have talked through their journeys, the ones that are probably the happiest and the most fulfilled are those that take deliberate time to fill their own cup, to work on those things or to give themselves that gift of being free to take care of themselves, of not worrying about other people's needs before they've worried about their own. Do you see that?
I agree. And even if that means, I get it. We all have busy schedules, especially in the morning. We're getting kids ready to go to school or whatever that might look like in your household with 5 kids. I'm sure it's quite busy. So does that look like maybe we wake up 30 minutes earlier so we can just have that quiet time that we so desperately need to just connect, check in? Maybe that looks like, okay, I can't squeeze in my workout. Do I need to wake up 30 minutes earlier? Now, listen, I get it. Today is the first day of daylight savings. So anybody waking up early today was not happening. I'm also guilty. I hear it. But as we ease into the new daylight savings time and sorry, I know that's not evergreen content, but as we lean into daylight savings time and we identify where do we need a little bit more expansiveness in our day, maybe that looks like waking up 30 minutes or an hour earlier, just so you get to start your day in a calm, peaceful way that gives you the bandwidth that you need to carry out the rest of the day. Go ahead and connect and be dialed in before the kids get up and start screaming for breakfast or before you have to wake them up, right? Allow yourself those few minutes in the morning. I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think giving yourself permission to seek out alternate, counseling or therapy or yoga classes or something, whatever fills your bucket, giving yourself permission and time to really engage in those activities to make yourself whole. I love that idea, Ellen. Thank you for bringing that up. That's super smart.
Thank you. Thank you. I do practice yoga often. And if I could do it every day, I absolutely would do it every day. I pretty much do it every day, but sometimes I need a break. But yoga is definitely a huge piece of this journey for me. I think by leaning into yoga and the principles of yoga and that philosophy, it's helped me identify some of these pockets of time in my life where I could lean into self-soothing behaviors that allow me to show up fully in other areas of my life when I need to.
Yeah. And that's the other side of that. Taking time to care for yourself allows you to be more in your life, because you filled your own bucket first, and then you can show up for other people as well. I like that. If you could go back and talk to yourself at the beginning of this journey at 19, 20, 21, what would you tell yourself, Ellen?
I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I was chatting with a friend literally yesterday, and we were talking about this exact same thing. I had an opportunity to go to Europe when I was 19, and I actually did not take that opportunity because I was scared to travel internationally by myself, study abroad. I was just really scared to do all of that, right? And I often look back now that I do have a lot more international connections and I travel abroad a lot more often now in my adult life. I look back and I wonder what would have been different had I leaned into that experience. And so my biggest advice for anyone that's like a young adult, you're out on your own, or maybe you're in college, you're experiencing those things, take it all in. Find a way. There is a friend of mine that says she has a trust fund for adventure, and she always trusts that the funds will appear for her next adventure. Now, I'm sure she has different strategies in how she does that, but isn't it interesting? Like, whatever you focus on expands. So if there's something that is like, wow, I wish I had the courage to do that, just do it. Take the leap. Don't be afraid. Just do the damn thing, whatever it is. Just do it.
I love that. Yeah. And that's the time to be a little bit fearless, isn't it? When you're young and you like, what's the worst that's going to happen? You have to, work at McDonald's for a little while to replenish your bank account, right?
I was thinking about this literally yesterday, as thinking about that missed opportunity to go to Europe. And it's just so funny because now, of course, we've got mortgages, we've got responsibilities. I had the girlfriend that I had coffee with yesterday, having this exact same conversation. Her son, similarly, I was like, just do it. He has no responsibilities right now. He has no mortgage payment. I don't even think he had a car payment. I'm like, this is the time. You're not going to get any other opportunity in your life when you have less attachments. Just do it.
Yeah. I love that. I actually encouraged my youngest, graduated high school and went to Costa Rica to teach English for 4.5 months. She wanted a bit of an adventure. And I'm like, oh yeah. I said, take advantage, do it. Yeah.
That is so cool. Awesome.
What scared you the most when you started down this journey? And does it still scare you, or did you figure out how to deal with it? Talk to me about that.
I saw a post from a friend of mine this morning, and she was talking about this mantra, why not me? And I feel like it's very fitting for this question.
Mm-hmm.
When we reach a certain stage of our development or emotional growth, I would say that there's a flip that happens, right? That flip of why me to why not me. And that's a beautiful place to be in, because all of the possibilities in the world, remember when you were a kid and your parents were like, you could be anything that you want to be. They would tell us that, but they didn't have the roadmap, right? Like, you could be president of the United States if you wanted to be, but how do we get there? What's that roadmap look like, right? So I think when we can get to a place that we are confident enough within ourselves that we can say, why not me? We open ourselves up to the possibilities. Mm-hmm. And when I got sober, that was a very real conversation. Could I even do that? Could I commit to a life where I'm not leaning into these other vices? And then it was like, why not me? Other people do it. I see other people being successful in this sober space. I'm sure I could be successful too. Mm-hmm. And so when we flip that narrative of, instead of why me, why, whatever, and flip it to why not me, then we really open ourselves up to all the possibilities. And so I would like to just encourage anyone to just kind of ruminate on those 3 words for a minute. why not me, and think about what could change. And so when I started the Booze Free Babes community, it grew overnight. It was right before dry January, and we just took off. And I was not prepared for that response. We started out as a very small Facebook group for a local community. And you hit one dry January and we exploded to the global stage.
Oh, wow.
Right. And so I was like, I had no idea that this was going to happen. And I did not know what to do with it. And then I had to shift my thinking on it. Like, okay, we've got something here. We really have something. And this is something I really want to lean into, but I have no idea what to do with it. And I still don't know some days, right? But we're doing something. And that why not me really kicked in, because why not me? Why can't I have a successful podcast? Why couldn't I have a successful community? Why not have membership-based group coaching program? We can do all of these things, and I can still have my business too. So why not me?
I love that. I really do like that theory. Like, why not me? Because as as I have interviewed several different women, they're all very successful and interesting, and they've all had their own challenges. And you do tend to look at that and say, she did it. How come I couldn't? Why not me? I love that. Like, does she have a special superpower that I don't have, or could I do what she did if I were willing to give it that effort? So I love that, Ellen. I love that. I'm going to put that somewhere in my office.
I got to add one more thing to that, because I'm a member of a female entrepreneur group called the Dames, and that group of women showed me what was possible, right? Because if I didn't see other women mentors, then I would never know. And so I'm not trying to promote that. I'm just saying, find women that are doing it and lean into those friendships. If you're in a room where every single female is complaining and moaning and not reaching their goals, change rooms. When you change rooms, I promise you, your life changes too.
Yeah. In fact, Megan, the head of the Dames, is scheduled not too long from now as one of our podcast guests. So,
great. That's so great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do love that idea of like finding like-minded, finding your tribe, wherever your tribe is, but those people that make you want to do better, be better, try harder. Those ones that give you the example and the mentorship of what could you do? What is possible? Yeah. And then ask that question. Why not me? She can. Right. Why not me?
Right. Exactly.
What about unique challenges? Did you face any unique challenges because you were a woman, Ellen?
I know that we hit on this a little bit in our earlier conversation about some challenges that comes up specifically in the financial industry, being a male-dominated industry and being a woman. There are definitely different times in my life that I look back that there was an inappropriate behavior in the workplace. And unfortunately, that's just a part of our narrative, right? That was a part of our story, but there's a huge shift around that. And I think that we're seeing it. Now, I'm self-employed today, so I no longer work in an environment where I would be subjected to that kind of behavior in the daily 9-to-5 grind work environment. However, it still exists, right? There's still some discrimination, and there is still, it's just still there. Let's just say that, right? So my advice to any young woman that may be met with that type of behavior is that it's like we always have to work just a little bit harder, right? We have to work a little bit harder. We have to stay a little bit later. We've got to submit our projects a little bit sooner. The life of the overachiever, we recognize that the cards may be not stacked perfectly in our favor. So we have to overachieve in order to just succeed or just meet the mark. That's the behavior that we've had to really do over the past, in my career. And Lorie, you're shaking your head. So I'm assuming that that's also something similarly that you have experienced. As women reach more roles of leadership, that shift in that dynamic is changing. And I feel like that we are creating safer work environments. I don't know. I mean, do you feel like that's happening too, that shift? I mean, I could sit here and say, was I, overlooked for a promotion? Yeah, probably, right? And, how many times do we let that happen before we take our own power back and just go into business for ourselves? And that's kind of what happened in my case. I'm not going to say that I chose to go into business for myself because of discrimination by men in the industry. That is not at all true. But what is true is that I had to believe that I was powerful enough to be a woman in leadership and to be a business owner.
Yeah.
That's probably where the shift needs to happen. Believing in ourselves enough, right? And having confidence within ourselves that we could be in leadership, that we could be in rooms with 6, 7, 8, figure income earners, and that we could be those earners ourselves, right? Like, I think the shift is happening with us being more confident and standing in our power. That's the real shift.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd add to that I think that having more examples, women mentors, examples of women who have been successful in those spaces and showing us that it's possible, what's possible, what we can do has been truly transformational. I feel like we're seeing people that look like us in finance and in all those aerospace, engineering, a lot of those that are traditionally male dominated fields. We're seeing a lot more women, and they're willing to share their experiences.
You hit the nail on the head. Having female mentors is huge. And because you mentioned Megan, I'm just got to bring up Funference. The first Funference that I went to, I was very new in my sobriety. I've probably had the confidence of a hermit crab, a hard exterior that I freaking hid under. You know what I mean? And that first Funference, I got to meet women that were, like I said, 6, 7, 8 figure earners and business owners. And when you're in a room with women that hold these high positions of leadership and C-suite, or are business owners that are, far outpacing anything that I ever thought that I could imagine for myself in a year, that was the shift. That was the switch. I had never met women like that before in my life. Now, I have a very strong, independent role model of a mother who is highly educated, but she's also a teacher, right? So think of like that type of salary. I'm looking at women millionaires.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting at a table with female millionaires. This is what I needed to see. This is what I needed to know what was possible. And that was just a few short years ago. I had to see that so I could be confident that I could be that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And that confidence, that imposter syndrome goes away when you start seeing that there are successful women and hearing their stories and kind of watching what they do and emulating that. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely. That is so important. And so, I know maybe when we're in high school and we see those things like, women's groups or whatever that try to bring high school girls into them or whatever. All I have to say is maybe back then I probably looked at that and was like, oh, what's this hokey thing? I don't know. Maybe it's something my mom wanted me to do. Do it, because you're going to see women who are being successful. So if anything, this is empowering me just to reach out more to young women in my own community and just showing them what's possible.
Yeah, I love that. I love that, because that perpetuates the cycle. That helps them to move ahead where they're at in their space, and then they can reach out and pay it forward to the next generation. I love that. Ellen, what is the thing that you are most proud of?
I'm most proud of my sobriety. I'm most proud of the courage that it took to embark on that new journey and to find a new way of being at a later age in life. And I'm proud of the path that has taken me on to create our Booze Free Babes community, to create a supportive environment where we share the journey together, we share the load together, we share the burden together, and we share resources and healing modalities. That's the beauty, because I don't have all the answers, and neither does the Booze Free Babes community. But what we can do is collectively come together and share what's worked for us. And obviously, my charge on that is subconscious integrative therapy, but there's tons of resources out there for healing, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever that looks like for you and whatever is accessible for you, because there is an entry level commitment, right? Financial commitment to health, mental health, unfortunately, right? That's a reality. And so whatever is available to you, whatever resources are available that you can afford, lean into them and start that journey and see where that leads you.
I love it. Any advice for a young woman who's just starting down this path that you're already so successful at? Anything that you would tell her?
Besides take the trip to Europe? I would say that if you could not lean into unhealthy behaviors like alcohol, I get it. We're, young budding women new to being out on our own. We're outside of our parents' control and we want to experience new things, and everybody's partying in college and we want to check that out. Just be smart and definitely be safe. That's the biggest thing. Be safe. And if you're seeing that maybe what started out as a fun weekend party thing starts to consume every day or takes over your collegiate goals, whatever that is, maybe just be mindful or a little bit more aware in that moment and catch it before it goes too far. That would be my biggest recommendation. It's your life. It's your journey, and you are absolutely in control of it. And you can control the direction of it too. That's probably the biggest piece of advice, is recognizing that you are in control of your journey and you are in control of the next steps. So if you look around and you don't like what you see, you absolutely have the power to change it and find out what resources you need to do exactly that.
I love it. Ellen, that is great advice. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today, sharing your journey, sharing your story. I've really enjoyed it. If a young lady wants to get in touch with you and ask you questions, how does she do that?
EllenFrazier.com has all of the information. That's Ellen Frazier, FRAZIER.com. That's going to take you to the Booze Free Babes community and everything that we do.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for spending your time and sharing that really powerful story and just being so authentic with us. I really appreciate it, Ellen.
Thank you so much for having me, Lorie. I've had so much fun. And to all those fearless females out there, just keep going. I promise it's so worth it. And it's so yummy.